Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I'm just tying in sweet peas in here. And you do need to just keep tying them up until the tendrils fully develop, and then they will entwine themselves on whatever you use to support them. And at this time of year, there is a real sense of summer just rolling in off the back of spring. And here in the writing garden, we've still got some cow parsley and these wonderful alliums, great bubbles of white flowers the bees just love, and the silene. It is one of those plants that once it gets hold, which only takes about a year, it spreads like mad. But for the moment, I will forgive it all that for its sheer beauty and joy. On today's programme, Nick Bailey celebrates the blousy beauty of rhododendrons.
They might be bold, they might be brash, but I reckon there's a rhododendron out there for all of us.
Carol, Jo and Francis visit the RHS Chatsworth Flower Show to see the very best of the plants and gardens on display. And I've got a lot of planting to do. In the vegetable garden, I shall be putting out cabbages and climbing beans, and it's time to plant out the tender climbing annuals in the dual garden. We've extended the orchard beds, so now they run right down towards the gate out to the fields. So the first stage when you're starting a border like this is to get your shrubs in. So they have room to grow and they will dominate the planting. And I'm starting just with one very simple shrub, but one that I absolutely adore. It's the spindle. Now this is a variety called Red Cascade, which has a very distinctive pink fruit. I want to put one about there. I'm going to pop this up here. So a couple of shrubs as the backbone of the border. Now, this is Regersia. And this is a classic case where you've got two plants that do not share the same growing conditions. A spindle, which likes good drainage, limestone, chalk, and then Regersia that likes clay, even boggy conditions. But because I'm growing it down slightly lower, and because this floods, I can get away with it. So this is Actea. Incredible dark burgundy stems, and then it's topped with a white flower. Two things you really do need to be aware of at this stage, which is that your perennials are likely to be bigger than the shrubs, or certainly as big. And the second thing is, have a look from every viewpoint. So if I top that, say there, I've now got a clump, and I think it's getting a little bit of structure, although it's very early days. Now this barrow is full of Rothsay Reveller, which is a marvellous burgundy-coloured dahlia with white tips and flowers for months on end. And the point about this is it will be lifted in October. So it's temporary planting. And we can put this one here, and I think one down here. Finally, I have two trays of annuals. Annuals are a godsend. You can fill it up, you get a fairly instant display that will look good all summer, so certainly a tray or two of annuals are essential when you're starting a new border. Right, I'm going to start by getting the shrubs in. Now you can see it's slightly root bound, and the answer is just to gently break the roots. Don't try and untangle them. By breaking them, what you'll do is stimulate regrowth. There we go, that will be fine. When you have a plant like a spindle that likes good drainage, you'll do no harm by planting it slightly proud of the soil, because it may well settle. Firm it in well. It's lovely to get to planting at last because this is the culmination of quite a long process, getting it to the point where you can just start to get plants in the ground. And it'll then go on to take as long as it does. Now, I'm sure that you are aware that yesterday was the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy in 1944. And to mark the event, Gardener's World has an inspiring story. On the 6th of June 1944, Allied forces launched a sea, land and air invasion of German-occupied France in an operation that came to be known as D-Day. We heard about 96-year-old Dennis Davidson in Coventry, who served with the Royal Army Service Corps in Normandy. And he decided to create something special to commemorate the memory of his fallen comrades.
What I see are the fields and the hedgerows of Normandy. This is creating something good from something evil. My name is Dennis Joseph Davison. Well, the main photo is a very good-looking young man. Oh, it's me, 1944. I was in Normandy. I was with the Royal Army Service Corps, attached to the 7th Armoured Brigade, which later involved in the heaviest fighting of the war. The Battle of Villiers-Bocage. This battle was fought in the apple orchards of Normandy. We lost 300 tanks one afternoon. 300 tanks. Boys, young soldiers blown to pieces. I remember one morning I saw some aircraft coming in. When I was lying on the ground, wondering whether a friend or enemy, I picked an apple up, and that apple seemed to symbolise something, the fallen apple. To me, it's the same as the Flanders poppy. The poppies grow in Flanders fields, so the apples grow in the bocage in Normandy. We are in the Peace Orchard of Coventry, which I helped set up. There are about 230 apple trees here. This is better than I dared believe it would be. Absolutely wonderful. This is not a memorial garden, not in the least. It's to celebrate the lives of those young men who gave their lives, who gave their all, so that we could live our life that we live today. A seed is sown, a tree grows, an apple falls, and so the cycle goes on. The children come from local schools and they play and they have fun, and exactly what I was hoping for. I'm certain that my friends would be well pleased with what we've created. This man in the photograph would say, "I'm very proud of you."
I do think that planting an orchard is one of the most creative and life-affirming things that anybody could ever do. Right, I'll turn the hose off and push on. A few weeks ago, I thinned the seedlings in my seedbed. These are all brassicas of various sorts, and the red cabbage is now ready for transplanting. And when you're lifting them, ease them out with as much root as possible and a nice plug of soil. It's important that I quickly go and transplant these before the roots dry out. Before you plant any brassica, it's a good idea to add an inch or so of compost. It gives it a boost, because bearing in mind these are leafy crops, and if they just get a little bit of a push, they grow away strongly. If I plant one out like that, and I'm burying it quite deeply and firmly, really push them down in the ground. So if you want prize large round heads, give them a bit more room. If you just want a relatively small, delicious red cabbage, this will do fine. I need to give them a really good water in, and then make sure that they are protected, but other than that, they really don't need much attention at all. You don't like the hose pipe, do you, old chap? Now, from brassicas to legumes. These are climbing beans, a variety called Eva that I sowed about 6 weeks ago, and now they are ready to put out. If you didn't do that, don't worry. You can sow beans directly now. Put a couple of beans at the base of each support, and then when they both germinate, remove the weaker of the two. You can gently tie these in, but the growing stems are very fragile at the moment. Better to have them a bit floppy initially, but not damaged. But other than that, all they've got to do is grow, and pods will develop in about 2 months' time. Now, although it's lovely to be back at Longmeadow doing some real gardening, getting my hands dirty, the flower show season is still in full flow. And now it is the turn of RHS Chatsworth in Derbyshire with its glorious backdrop. And Joe, Carol and Francis are exploring the very best of it.
Hello and welcome to the beautiful Peak District, home to one of the most historic houses in England. And for a few days only, the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire transformed their front garden into the RHS Chatsworth Flower Show. With 10 show gardens here, packed full of inspiration, you're spoilt for Chatsworth choice. We're also on the hunt for ideas that you can lift and, well, steal and use in your own garden. But first, Carol is unsurprisingly already in the floral marquee, surrounded by flowers. So what's caught her eye this year?
Us gardeners are used to looking at most of our plants on the ground, but there are some plants that make us lift our eyes to the heaven, and this has to be the daddy of them all. It's Echium pininana, and it's called blue steeple, very aptly. It's a member of the borage family, and as such, its blue flowers are absolute magnets for bees. It's always covered in them. When it's flowered, it'll die. But by then it will have set so much seed and chucked it around here, there and everywhere. And in 2 or 3 years, with a bit of luck, you'll have a whole forest of these magnificent spikes. This has to be one of the most scrumptious, exotic climbers I've ever seen. It's Cissus discolor. It comes from East Africa, and you can tell by just one look that it's the sort of plant that twines itself around in a tropical jungle. It's a house plant. You can grow it in a conservatory or a greenhouse, but you must ensure that it's never ever in direct sun, or these leaves will scorch. It's commonly known as Rex begonia because immediately you see those leaves, that's the plant that they remind you of. Heucheras are not renowned for their stature, but here's one, Heuchera Thomas, which is head and shoulders above the rest. It's probably the tallest flowering Heuchera. It inherits this height from one of its parents, Heuchera cylindrica. I love these pale green flowers. They're a perfect foil for this mat of minty green leaves, each with dark markings. Grow it in partial shade, where it'll really sparkle and light the place up. If you're after tall, stately plants in your beds and borders, then delphiniums have to be the ultimate. They are the go-to plants for height. These are all forms of Delphinium elatum. Elatum meaning lifted up. It's the tallest of all the delphinium species, and these are all cultivars from that. Delphiniums are hungry plants, so make sure you add lots and lots of compost when you're planting them. And make sure too that the soil is reasonably well drained. They don't like sitting around in soggy soil. You can use them as punctuation marks or focal points, or to make a glorious crescendo in your summer borders.
I love a plant with a bit of height. This is Malabar spinach. It's a climbing spinach originating from Asia. You can eat every part of it and it grows on anything. Just make sure it gets plenty of sunshine because it likes a little bit of heat. Now, every year, RHS Chatsworth selects one specialist nursery and crowns them Master Grower. This year, Heritage Fruit and Veg Growers Pennard plants have been given that accolade. Now, you might think being Heritage, you know exactly what to expect. But these guys are more exotic than you might think.
I've got a great interest in edible plants. My grandfather and my father were very keen vegetable gardeners. We never had prepared vegetables in those days. Everything was fresh from the greengrocer, or they came off the allotment. And so I was looking for varieties that my father grew, or my grandfather grew, and really couldn't find the seed for them. And so in 2006, we started a range of heritage and heirloom seeds. The heirloom bit really relates to perhaps local varieties, varieties that maybe have never been in really commercial cultivation. The heritage varieties probably were commercial varieties at one time and have just dropped out of use or sale by some of the major seed companies. They are well tried, they are flavoursome, they grow well in a domestic situation, they produce a good crop, and unlike a lot of the hybrids, they crop over a long period of time. And that's why, really, the heritage and heirloom varieties are best suited to the home gardener. So the business itself, you could divide it into two halves. There's the plant business and there's the seed business. The number of packets we have probably amount to about 600 vegetables. Mike designs the packets for every single variety we sell.
We started with the carrots, and they all had carrots on them. And so we thought, well, it's a bit unusual, and you know, everybody knows what a carrot is, so let's try something different. So I put rabbits on them. And it kind of went from there, and then it just started snowballing on and on and on. I had no idea what to do with borage, so in the end, it's subtle. No, yeah, well, a bit weird, but I try to make them jovial. I mean, black Russian tomato is one of my probably top 20, I think. Oh, I put lots of love into it. I spend hours giving it love. And then, of course, when we go to the shows and everybody loves it, that makes me feel love them even more.
A lot of the seed is varieties that carrots, beetroot, that people want to grow. But we're constantly looking for new old varieties. So I am passionate about growing things that you wouldn't normally find in a UK garden, but are hardy and will grow in there, not just experimental things that might do it, might not. The most important thing is that they have outstanding flavour. Ugni Moline, this has to be my favourite plant. It's just an amazing little small shrub, but it will give you the tastiest of fruits. Here's a larger plant that we've grown for 2 or 3 years. This plant has been around since Victorian times. This was actually Queen Victoria's favourite fruit, and I can really understand why she loved it so much. The fruit is just delicious. They look like little tiny gooseberries, and when you're eating them, you perhaps think that they're going to taste like that. They don't. They're really sweet. They taste of alpine strawberries, only the best alpine strawberries that you've ever tasted. So here we have one of my very favourite plants. This is the Szechuan pepper. For all of you that don't think you can grow pepper in this country, this is the plant for you. It's as tough as old boots, and it will produce you the most delicious peppercorns that you've ever tasted around September, October time. It'll go to 6, 7, 8 feet. The flowers, they're starting already. That's the promise of the pepper for later on in the season. Another unusual plant we grow here is tea. Just pick the tip, some boiling water over the top, and you've got a delicious cup of really fresh green tea. And when you can actually enjoy the produce that you've grown, then what a feeling. It is just the best feeling in the world. The other thing we specialise in is trained fruit. We try and keep trained fruit growing alive and well. We've got a white currant here. Most people think of trained fruit as espaliers or fans. Well, this is a U cordon. It's shaped as a U, and it won't grow any wider than this. And look at the amazing amount of fruit on here. This year, we're at Chatsworth. And we are very proud to be there this year because we have been awarded the RHS Master Grower, which for us is very important as somebody who grows edible plants. Here we're planting some pretty little pink strawberries. It's a variety called Just Add Cream because it's so sweet, all you need to do is just add cream. So hopefully these will be ready for Chatsworth, complete with delicious fruits that we might even let people taste.
Chris, the strawberries made it.
Yes, we managed to get a few here and a few ripe fruit.
Is it all right to try one?
You can certainly try one, yes.
Thank you very much.
They're really good.
It's really fresh tasting, isn't it?
Yes, yes. As it says, just add cream.
Yeah, that's delicious. And there's a lot of interest here on your stand. Do you think people are getting more into that heritage
I
seed?
think people really love the older varieties. They're beginning to realise that they were the varieties that their forefathers grew and that they've got real flavour, and actually they were bred for the home gardener. And so they do really well in just the garden or the allotment.
Are there any heirloom varieties that have eluded you?
Over the years, yes, there's one thing, which is a Brussels sprout. Now, you either love them or hate them, but the variety Peer Gynt I sold in the 1970s, and I've never been able to find it since then. So we're really looking out, but I've searched the world and never found it.
What's it like?
It's a little dwarf variety, so it would cope with the Derbyshire wind. It's brilliant.
Well, hopefully someone might have it.
That would be fantastic if we could find it again.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, indeed.
Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.
We're increasingly understanding just how important trees are for us and our environment. And from a design point of view, I think a garden always feels as if it's missing something if it doesn't have at least one tree, and they add plenty of height and structure. But we are scared of planting trees. We think they're going to get into the foundations of the house, or they're just going to get too big for the space. But it's all about knowing what tree to plant and where to put it. Here at Chatsworth, there's about 100 specimen trees that create this temporary woodland, and one of them has caught my eye. An oak like this will grow for hundreds of years, and a mature oak can be host to up to 400 species of invertebrates, so fantastic for wildlife and biodiversity. But this one, I'm afraid it'll set you back about £7,500, and oh, did you want delivery with that? That could be a bit extra. But if you can't think big as this, here's something else. Now, for a medium or medium-small size garden, this is much more appropriate. And this is a form of Cornus cusa. At the moment, it's covered in these apple green flowers. It's very of the moment. And what's nice about it is it's versatile. You can mix it in with pretty much any planting scheme and it will just work. And the flowers are in fact showy bracts. They're very long lasting. And then the strawberry-like fruit take over, which the birds absolutely adore. Now, what I like about these plants is the structure of them as well. And here they're growing a lovely little sweet pea through there to take over, prolong the season. And in the autumn, the colour this plant goes, a lovely burnt orange colour, which it gets even better if your soil is slightly acidic. So that's a great choice for an average-sized garden. For a small garden, you can't go wrong with crab apples. They offer up so much and they never get too big. Now, this is a new one on me. This is called Malus Peters Red, and you can see it's got this lovely burgundy foliage. But before this, it has pink flowers, and then it's followed by crab apple fruit in a deep red colour, which the birds adore. But what I particularly like is that it's a multi-stemmed form. It's not just a single tree. This will get to maybe 4 or 5 metres, but you can easily keep it smaller, and then also take some branches out and maybe lift some branches from lower down to keep a sort of really nice, loose, naturalistic shape. But one of these in your garden really will do so much throughout the year. This could be the one for you. New best friend. And this little ginkgo proves that you don't actually need a garden to have a tree at all. You can grow it in a pot and put it out on, say, a balcony. It will stay restricted. This lovely little ginkgo will get to about 3 or 4 metres tall if it was grown in the ground, but growing in a pot will restrict it even further, in a way bonsaiing this plant. And ginkgos go back 270 million years. They're prehistoric plants, and they've got fabulous scalloped leaves and then turn an amazing buttery autumn colour and are tough as old boots too. But look at that. You can't have this one. This one's mine.
This is the Find Yourself Lost in the Moment garden. And the whole thing's been created by volunteers at Derby College. It's supposed to emphasise, using this spiral motif, just how gardening draws you in, and also just how wonderful it is for your mental and physical health. And the planting emphasises that. It's almost ethereal, it's soft, it's romantic, and the use of plants and colour is just perfect. Here you've got this soft, steeper tenuissima. It's the most wafty of grasses, and spots of brilliant colour provided by this geum, totally tangerine. Lovely purple penstemons too. And if you come over here, you've got just the same sort of planting again, but here you've got additional plants, and some of them are incredibly interesting, things I haven't seen before. So this is Haloragis, a little bronzy New Zealander, and here's Agastache from Mexico, brilliant bright orange flowers. If you go into this back corner, you're lost in this wonderful kind of wilderness, tall grasses, Ami gracelands, astrantias. It's wild and beautiful. I think the whole garden is just superb. It really gives you that message. In fact, I could just sit down here and just enjoy the whole thing, let it waft right over me. Trouble is, I might never get up.
We all need a place to collect our thoughts and calm busy minds, and I can't think of anywhere better than here in this wildlife garden. Now, the whole idea of this is to bring in as much varied wildlife as possible and provide habitat and food for that. And a really important component of that in any garden is water. Now, this has an enormous pond that will provide places for insects, nymphs, dragonfly, larvae of different kinds, as well as frogs, amphibians, newts will all live in this pond. And plus, it will provide drinking places and bathing places for birds and other wildlife too. Something this garden makes us think about is our lawns. Now, we love our lawns and we're very used to seeing this monoculture of grass like this here. But here they've also scraped up a huge section of it all over and filled it instead with wild flowers. Now that will bring in all kinds of insects and pollinators. Or you could just do what they've done in other patches outside the fence and just not mow it for a bit, maybe a few months, maybe a year, or maybe even never at all, and see what wildlife comes to visit your garden. Now, of course, this garden is all about the plants. There are different kinds of plants here. There are trees, hedges, shrubs, and lots of nectar-rich herbaceous perennials. And they will all provide different things, some of them habitat, some of them food for wildlife. Now, with herbaceous perennials, it's a really good way of bringing colour into your garden, but also it provides so much. There are succession plants, so you'll have flowers all throughout the year, and then if you leave the seed heads on, that will give nesting material for birds in the winter and the autumn. But if you specifically want to target pollinators, think about a palette of colours on the spectrum of blues and purples. This garden is absolutely full of them, and it's also full of bees. There are lovely spires like the salvias, the foxgloves and the nepetas, but also more classic shapes like the geranium and the irises, and you are guaranteed to have a buzz in your garden.
There's always an opportunity to do a little bit of shopping here. And some fantastic plants in their absolute prime. That's gorgeous iris, that. And it's also nice to see bulbs like this Scilla peruviana. in flower. It would be autumn planted, and you can see exactly what you're going to get. But to get to this stage, a lot of work goes into the process, and we caught up with a specialist grower from Warrington as he prepared for the show.
My name is Bert Blankers, and I've been in the bulb growing industry for the last 10 years. I was born in South Africa. I was brought up in the Netherlands, in Holland. I've always worked on farms milking cows. And when I was 14, I also started working on the garden center as a Saturday job up until I left Holland when I was 19. I always say we're a small nursery, but we grow a lot of plants. This year we had about 18,000 alliums in pots. So, you know, yes, we probably shift a few plants, yes. We're called petrichor bulb specialists, and I chose the name petrichor. It means the smell of the earth after a dry spell, after rain. This is where we store our bulbs this time of the year. We basically store them in the wind. We rotate the trays, so we get fresh air from bottom going up. Here we got our first Allium Schubertii of the year. A lot of people always say, oh, we've had a very big flower, a massive flower last year, and this year it's not come back at all, which is not unusual for a Schubertii. The reason why that is because it's grown originally from a seed. That seed will take 5 years to develop into a little bulb, and then it will take at least a couple of years before you actually see a little bit of a flower. It grows a big flower, and everybody's very happy, and then the following year, it doesn't come back. That is just the lifespan of a Schubertii. In general, these particular bulbs need very well-drained soil and, in general, light, sunny conditions. This is the Ornithogalum sarnesi, or also called the black-eyed chinchirinchi. Very popular as a cut flower. The flower, as a cut flower, probably lasts about 3 to 4 weeks. And when you grow it as a plant, the flower will last you 2 months, no problem. Very popular, very good lasting. It does need a little bit of care in the winter. We advise people to store it not just frost-free, but dry and at room temperature. If you keep it warm through the winter, it reflowers a lot better the following year. We are pretty much busy all through the year. We do a lot of different shows and events every week. We are exhibiting at Chatsworth, and we have been there since that show started. This year we're going to be taking the allium bulbs. In plants, we probably got 3 or 4 varieties that we will still have in flower and in the right conditions for Chatsworth. This is typical allium ambassador, and once the flower starts to grow, the leaves really go quite brown in this variety. So what we do, we cut the tips off to make the plant a bit more presentable. Even though there's nothing wrong with the plant, it just doesn't look very nice on the stand. So we tend to clean them up, and they look a lot better that way. We will also still have some Scilla peruviana, white and blue at Chatsworth as well. That's always a very popular one. It's a nice, short plant, very hardy. The color is beautiful on the blue one, and it's always a very attractive plant. We've also got some agapanthus that are probably going to be ready for the show garden at Chatsworth. For the rest, we rely a little bit on cut flowers to add a little bit of color to the show garden. Planting depths, in general, rule is 2 to 3 times the depth of the bulb. So that means if I've got a big bulb like this, eucomus, I would go at least double the depth. Certain bulbs, like an allium, we always advise to plant a lot deeper. That way they'll also stand up to the wind. This is an allium red Mohican, also a very popular variety. When the flower is out, it's a lovely red color, and it's got a little tuft on the top, hence it's called red Mohican. It's very much curled when it first starts to grow as a flower, and by the time it's starting to open, it's sort of straightened itself out, which is a lovely feature of that as well. Some of the varieties that we grow, people say, OK, well, I've got very heavy, wet soil in the winter. Alliums don't seem to be doing so well, which is correct. You know, they don't want to be swimming in water in the winter. They need just well-drained soil. They say, can we then grow them in pots? And I prefer to see them in the open ground, but yes, you can grow in pots, but make sure that if you pot them up, that you use a good-sized pot. Because what happens with most alliums, they after they finish flowering, the bulb divides itself. And for those bulbs to grow into mature, big bulbs, the roots need space to grow. And as long as the roots have space to grow, those bulbs will then grow into bigger bulbs. You know, people say, how can you enjoy potting up 15,000 bulbs? For me, it's a meditation. It's being there, planting, seeing them root, which is always a very important thing. I'm forever looking under my pots to see if I see any roots. Because as a bulb, you know, once you see the roots coming through the pot, you know you've got a good, healthy bulb inside that pot. And then putting them outside and seeing them grow and then developing a flower. It's just a lovely process.
But it's lovely to see you. Obviously, very passionate grower, and you love your plants.
We do.
But one question I want to ask is, you know, you're selling bulbs now. Most people plant alliums in the autumn. Is it okay to plant them now?
It's absolutely fine to plant them now. We always say you store your bulbs, store them in the natural environment rather than in your cupboard.
And the natural environment is?
In the ground.
Okay.
So yes, you can plant them now.
And once they're in the ground, do they tend to fizzle out over a few years, or do they get stronger? Or does that depend what soil you've got?
It depends on what soil, but it also depends on the variety.
Which one would you recommend that's going to come back year on year?
Globemaster, Purple Sensation always come back.
Yeah. We saw you snipping some of the yellow leaves off. Is that a problem because they're not going to feed back into the bulb?
First of all, an allium gets most of its nutrition through the roots anyhow. And secondly, we just cut the dead bits off as it is. The green foliage is still putting some nutrition back into the bulb.
And their seed heads are beautiful in the border. But do you ever recommend taking those off to enhance the growth of the bulb?
That only works if you really cut the flower in a very early stage.
Okay.
Once you let it flower, it doesn't make a difference anymore.
Okay, great. So we can leave them looking good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right until they fade away.
Absolutely.
But it's a great exhibit. The bees are absolutely loving it. Lovely to meet you.
Well, thank you very much.
What an amazing show it's been. I think if I've got to choose just one thing, though, it has to be Tulip Sprengeri with these lovely red satiny petals. But I love this meadow too.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Especially that corner.
It's really and on the roof as well.
Yeah, everywhere you look, meadow, meadow, meadow.
Yes.
Don't you love the fact that they allow dogs in?
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really unusual, but I kind of wish I'd brought mine along.
Mine too. Do you think they would have got on?
I reckon so. They probably would have torn around, though, and created havoc wherever they went. I think my favourite parts, did you see the stumpery down by the woodland? I really liked it, but not so much of the stumpery as actually the silver birch edging to the raised beds. I just thought that worked really nicely.
Yeah.
And also, something that surprised me about myself was I really liked a rockery, but rather than using alpine plants, it was just filled with water plants and little kind of cascades going all over it on one of the stands. Really beautiful.
Well, I love rock gardens. You know, they're not just on the way back, they've arrived.
They have. They're clearly, they're here anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it was a great show.
It's been splendid.
Yeah.
I don't want to go home.
No, although that cloud says otherwise.
Yeah, perhaps.
If you want to visit the show, it's still on till Sunday night. And if you can't get to it, don't worry, because tomorrow night on BBC Two at 6:30, Arit, Adam, Nick and Carol will be bringing you a 1-hour special with lots more from the show itself. Now, I'm cutting back the Sweet Cicely. Sweet Cicely is a lovely herb, and unlike a lot of the umbellifers, the great thing about Sweet Cicely is that you can cut it back. When it starts to go to seed, and it's got these long seed pods, cut it back to the ground. That will look and seem rather drastic, but it will regrow and give you another performance. And by doing so, it enables me to get a better view of this rose. This is Madame Alfred Carrière, and the great thing about it is that it thrives on an east or a north-facing wall, which sometimes can be seen as a bit of a problem, but not for her. These 4 large pots at the centre of the jewel garden are a really important part of the display in each season. This year, I'm going to put in the tender annual climbers that I've been growing. These are cobia, we've got rhodochyton, and I want them to go up and give a brilliant display in the summer. If you grow a climber in any kind of container, it does need to be generous. You want a pot that is both wide as possible and give it some depth. So these tall, vigorous plants producing lots of flowers are going to need plenty of room for the roots to stretch and also nutrition. And to that end, I've mixed up my own compost. But if you can't do that, get a bark paste, rich compost, and also if you buy a bag of soil improver and mix that in with it, that will give it extra oomph and also retain the moisture better. Before I fill it up, these climbers are going to need a fairly substantial support. So I've got a selection of bean sticks, roughly the same size. Good strong bamboos would do. And I'm going to put 3 per pot, and then I need to tie them up. Now I've got 4 pots and 2 different types of climber. We've got cobia scandens, the cup and saucer plant, which will start flowering quite late, round about the end of July, early August, but go on and hit its real peak in September and early October. And I've got the purple bellflower, Rhodochyton atrosanguineus. That also has rich purple colour flowers, so really good for the jewel garden. So let's start with the rhodochyton. You can see at this stage, they're relatively small plants, starting to climb, or at least trail, in the pot, but they will get a lot stronger quite quickly once the weather warms up. Now these Rhodochyton atrosanguineus, they will grow a good 2 meters tall. Now if these are still quite small, the cobia are getting bigger almost by the day. That really wants to romp away. It's already about 2 foot tall and will grow very vigorously indeed. So 3 plants will be too many for a pot this size. 1 is ample. Okay. These very fine, almost hair-like tendrils are really clingy. So once these get going, they will support themselves, but I will have to tie that in. But that, you can see already, as I plant it out, is a third of the way up the tripod. So this will go right to the top. I may even have to trim it back. Now I'm really interested to see in particular how the Rhodochyton get on, because this is the first time I've grown them. They are a new plant for me. And I happen to know that rhododendrons are a newly acquired taste for Nick. So he's gone down to Bowood House and the woodland garden there to enjoy them at their very best.
Visit any large country estate and you can't miss them. Big, blousy blooms in sugary pinks, spilling out onto paths and rising up above us in swathes. But for the average garden, rhododendrons have often been overlooked. I think they've been hiding in plain sight. They might be bold, they might be brash, and some tend to think they're oversized for our smaller gardens. But I reckon if you look hard enough, there's a rhododendron out there for all of us. Originating in Asia and the Americas, rhododendrons first arrived in England in the 17th century, but it was the Victorians, with their proclivity for ostentation, who really took them to heart and planted them in vast numbers across their country estates. In recent years, the focus has been on one particular species, Rhododendron ponticum, and it's a real thug that's escaped from our gardens and invaded our wild landscapes. But I want to set the record straight. There are hundreds of rhododendrons out there that aren't invasive, aren't thuggish, and will do brilliantly well in our gardens. One of the most important things to know about rhododendrons is that they're incredibly promiscuous. In other words, they hybridize and produce new plants very easily, and it's played out right here. So behind me is the yellowy green rhododendron called Cool Haven. Behind me just here is the red one called Hummingbird. And what's happened is they've freely hybridized in the garden, giving rise to this new plant. And what's fascinating is it's taken characteristics from both parents and resulted in this plant. So you can see there's some reddy tones in the flower stems at the back. You can see it's almost become peachy in the center. And the interesting thing is this is still growing, so it's going to be a while before we can tell how big it's actually going to be. However, Hummingbird behind me is tried and tested in the long term, and it will get to about 2 meters high, maybe about 3 meters wide, making a really beautiful dome. So if you've got a medium-sized garden, this is the one to go for. Soil-wise, rhododendrons prefer moist, well-drained, acidic conditions, which means if you're planting them, check the pH of your garden soil first. Behind me here is a form called falconry, and it's so different to most of the rhododendrons you know. It's got these huge, exotic, big palm almost looking leaves, and then on the end, these clusters of beautiful white flowers. Now, in contrast, behind me here is Rhododendron mucronatum. It's got a very, very different quality. It's got this fine texture to its foliage with these beautiful, delicate white flowers. And it's also quite dense, which means it can be used brilliantly to make an informal garden hedge. So if you've got limited space, this is a perfect plant. Another distinct characteristic of rhododendrons is that they can look as beautiful before they open as they do when they come into bloom. And their upright buds often carry a richer pigment than the flowers themselves. You don't need to have acidic soil in your garden to be able to grow rhododendrons. There are plenty of dwarf varieties that grow well in containers. Some of these smaller rhododendrons were historically classified as azaleas, but today they've all been reclassified into that one big group of rhododendrons. This is silverwood behind here, which has these quite large open blooms with yellow and orange centres, really beautiful. One that I really love is Irene Costa. And you can see it's got this amazing floral range of colours, and they all suffuse into this beautiful mix. And both of them only get to about 1 metre or so tall, which means they're absolutely perfect for small gardens. Next time you're looking for colour in May, look no further than the rhododendron. Indulge in one of these sumptuous plants, and I can guarantee you won't be disappointed.
If you want to go and see those rhododendrons for yourself in the woodland garden at Bowood House, you'll need to go this weekend because it closes after Sunday. Of course, the rest of the gardens there remain open all summer. Right, I finished with these pots. They're planted up. All I have to do now is just to keep them watered and fed and let them grow. Right, that's one of my jobs done. Yep, you've guessed it. It's time for your jobs for the weekend. Now the nights are warming up, you can plant tomatoes outside. Bury them deeply, right up to the bottom leaves if possible, and space them about 18 inches to 2 foot apart in an east-west direction if possible, so they get maximum sunshine. Put in strong stakes so they can be gradually tied to them, and then hope we have a nice hot summer. Good boy, good boy. Come on. If, like me, you sowed biennials such as wallflowers or foxgloves a few weeks ago, some will now have germinated and be ready to prick out. Choose the largest seedlings and, holding them carefully by a leaf, prise out as much root as you can before potting them on into individual plugs. Water these and set them to one side. And then you can have another go at the smaller seedlings in a week or so's time. And if you haven't sown any biennials yet, it's not too late to do so now. Homemade comfrey feed is as effective as anything you can buy and will save you a lot of money. Cut a healthy plant right at the base, and don't worry, it will quickly regrow. Strip the leaves and chop up the stems and pack as much as you can into a bucket. Top the bucket up with water and set it aside for about 3 weeks to brew. But I warn you, it will smell disgusting. And I suspect one there. I'm setting out the Tolbagia. This is Tolbagia violacea in the Paradise Garden. And Tolbagia, which is a flowering garlic, has this lovely, delicate, pale mauve flower on a tall stem. And the idea is that it wafts gently in amongst the Verbena bonariensis and above the Stipa tenuissima. And I bought these last September when they were a fraction of the size. Grew them on over winter, and they have at least doubled in size. It's a really good, cheap way of getting a large number of plants. Buy them small and grow them on yourself rather than paying someone else to grow them on. And this can just be popped in there like that. But that's it for today. And before I go, if you do have a gardening problem that you don't know how to solve, contact us via social media. And a member of our presenting team could well come and visit you in your garden and help you out. But I shan't be in my garden next week because I will be joining the rest of the team at Gardeners World Live in Birmingham. So join us all at the same time next week at Gardeners World Live. Until then, bye-bye.
More from the RHS Chatsworth Flower Show tomorrow evening at 6:30. But next on BBC Two, with his job on the line, FBI man John O'Neill's ruffling feathers in Yemen on a mission to get to the truth in the looming tower.